The winds stir, restless and ancient, as you step into the forgotten world of the gods. The air is thick, with a presence you cannot quite name, a presence that presses upon your chest like the weight of 1,000 whispered secrets. You breathe it in each gust, laden with the distant scent of storm, salt, and something older still. It is the breath of Enlil, the god who once ruled the skies with a fury unmatched by any other deity. But that was long ago, and now his name has faded from memory, buried beneath the dust of time. There are no altars for Enlil now, no sacred winds carrying his breath across the earth. Yet you can feel him, feel the ancient power swirling in the corners of your mind like a storm gathering strength. A forgotten god. His presence trembles, invisible yet undeniable in the air you breathe. His story is not one of glory or might. No, his story is that of exile, madness, and a descent into darkness so complete that even the gods turned away. You take another breath. The storm is close, too close. It is said that Enlil's voice first echoed through the skies, before the world even had a name. Before the rivers ran, and the mountains stood firm against the horizon. His breath shaped the winds, and with them, he shaped the world itself. The winds that tore through the earth's skin were not merely weather. No, they were divine, a force that carried the whispers of creation itself. But now, those whispers have become harder to hear. Enlil. You murmur, the name slipping from your lips like a forgotten prayer. It is cursed, sacred, and once it was known by all. The people of Sumer, the great civilization that rose from the dust of the Tigris and Euphrates, called upon him in their times of need. His name was invoked in rites performed on mountaintops and in hidden temples that no mortal eye has seen for millennia. You pause, letting the weight of the forgotten god settle around you. There is a depth to Enlil's story, one steeped in shadows and mystery, a depth you are only now beginning to understand. His power was not merely that of wind and storm. No, there was something deeper, something far more terrifying beneath the surface of his reign. You must listen, for his story is not one to be taken lightly. The winds of Enlil carry more than dust and rain. They carry forbidden knowledge. You can feel it in the air, the weight of ancient wisdom, lost to the winds, scattered and broken like the ruins of a once mighty city. Enlil's story, his fall from grace, is written not in stone, but in the very fabric of reality itself. And now, as the storm begins to stir once again, you are drawn into it. You can no longer ignore it. You must follow the whispers. You must trace the path of the storm, even if it leads you into darkness. Before you can turn away, the voice beckons. A faint whisper carried on the wind. Enlil, it calls again, the name wrapping around you like a chain. It's a reminder, a summons, a call to delve deeper into the forgotten history of this god of the storm. Now, let's get started with today's story. The winds howl as you journey deeper into the forgotten realm of Enlil. It is said that before the heavens and the earth were fully formed, there was only chaos, the swirling tempest of the void. And it was from this void that Enlil emerged, not as a mortal being but as the embodiment of the winds themselves. The first breath of creation was Enlil's alone to command. In the beginning, there were no boundaries, only an endless sky. And within it, Enlil's voice, as vast and untamed as the storm itself. His dominion was the air, the breath of life that filled the lungs of the world. But his reign was not solely one of peace. To be the master of the storm was to wield a power that could both create and destroy, to possess a force that would shape the very fabric of the earth. And so Enlil, the god of wind and storm, ruled over the skies, his breath shaping the land and giving rise to the world as it is known. In the earliest texts, the ancients tell of a time when the winds whispered to them, guiding them like the hand of a god. Their voices were not those of wind, but of Enlil himself, a divine power that moved with the gusts and swirled in the clouds. With each mighty gust, the world took shape. The mountains rose, the rivers carved their paths, and the very foundation of existence trembled under the weight of Enlil's breath. But the creation of the world was not without its cost. The storm that Enlil birthed was not calm, not gentle. His winds were tempestuous, unpredictable, violent in their intensity. It is said that he could stir up such a fury within the skies that entire cities would be swept away in the chaos. But still, the mortals and the gods alike revered him, for his power was unmatched and his influence unchallenged. Yet, there is something unsettling about this story, a question that lingers in the silence between the winds. Why did Enlil choose the winds as his dominion? Is it merely by fate, by divine decree, or was there something deeper at play? It is said that the winds themselves held a secret, a key to an ancient mystery that even the gods could not understand. Some believe that Enlil's true power did not lie in his ability to shape the world, but in his control over the chaos that dwelled at the heart of existence. The winds, after all, are not simply forces of nature. They are carriers of change, messengers of destiny, of destruction, and renewal. And Enlil, the master of the storm, was the god who could channel these forces, bending them to his will. Yet there were those who dared to challenge Enlil's control over the winds. Among the gods, whispers of rebellion began to stir. There are tales of those who sought to wrest the power of the storm from his grasp, to manipulate the winds for their own gain. But these gods, these would-be usurpers, soon learned that the winds were not easily tamed. Enlil's breath was not just a force of nature. It was a living thing, a force that could not be controlled or caged. And so the winds continued to blow, carrying with them the memory of Enlil's dominion. But as you listen to the story, there is something in the way the wind howls now, something different, something older. It is as if the storm itself carries within it the echoes of a forgotten past. A past that has been buried by time and the weight of silence. There are whispers of an ancient ritual, one that involves the very breath of the storm. The gods themselves once performed it, a sacred ceremony to honor Enlil, to ensure that his dominion over the skies remained unchallenged. But the details of this ritual have been lost, and no mortal or god can say for certain what it entailed. What was the true power of Enlil's breath, and what did it mean to be the ruler of the winds? The mystery lingers, as elusive as the storm itself. And so, you are left with the question: did Enlil's dominion over the winds arise from his mastery of nature? Or was there something more, something hidden beneath the storm, buried deep within the heart of the breath that ruled the skies? As the wind picks up, you feel a chill run down your spine. The storm is gathering again. You stand at the edge of the world, where the winds shift uneasily, as if they remember something ancient, something forgotten. The breath of Enlil is a constant companion now, whispering to you with a voice that carries both power and sorrow. You feel the pull of something deeper, a hidden truth buried within the very air you breathe. It is the secret of Enlil's origins, a mystery that has haunted the gods and mortals alike for eons. Who was his true parent? Is he the son of Anu, the god of the heavens, as the ancient texts claim? Or was there something far more arcane that shaped the birth of the storm god? The winds carry with them the answer, but it is fragmented, elusive. In the sacred texts, Enlil is often described as the son of Anu, the sky god who ruled the heavens. Anu, with his vast power over the celestial bodies, would seem to be the perfect father for a god like Enlil, who held dominion over the wind, the storms, the very breath of the world. Yet, in the deep recesses of forbidden knowledge, there is an unsettling suggestion. Anu's role in Enlil's creation may not have been as simple as the myth tells. There are whispers of a forbidden ritual, an ancient ceremony held in the forgotten temples of the gods. Some believe that Enlil's true origin was not the result of Anu's divine will alone, but rather a dark, secretive act, one that involved forces far beyond the heavens. The ritual was said to take place beneath the light of a dying star, when the heavens themselves trembled. Only the highest of the gods knew the true nature of this ceremony, and it was said that the priests who participated were sworn to silence, their memories wiped clean by the very winds Enlil controlled. What was this forbidden ritual? What dark power did it unlock? Why was it hidden from mortal eyes, locked away in the winds themselves? You can almost hear the answers in the rustle of the breeze, but they are always just out of reach. Enlil's parentage is a puzzle with missing pieces, a mystery that has driven scholars to madness and even caused the gods to question their own knowledge of creation. Some texts suggest that Enlil's mother was not a goddess at all, but a primordial force, one older than Anu, older than the heavens themselves. In this version of the tale, Enlil's birth was not a divine union, but the result of an ancient cosmic collision. It is said that a rift opened in the sky, a tear in the very fabric of reality, And from this tear, Enlil was born. His power, unmatched by any other god, came from the storm that had shattered the heavens. And it was this chaos that infused his very being. Shiver as you hear the tale. Was Enlil truly the son of Anu? Or was he something far darker? Something that the gods themselves could not control? The winds seemed to grow colder, as if they too carry the weight of this knowledge. Could it be that Enlil was born not of the heavens, from a rift in the cosmos, something that would forever separate him from the gods of the sky, making him an outsider even among the immortals? And yet, even if Enlil's birth was not, as the myths tell, his power remains undeniable. He is the storm, the very breath that rules the skies, the force that can bring both life and death with a single gust. But his true parentage remains shrouded in mystery, a riddle that no god has dared to solve. Perhaps it is a secret that should never be known. You try to focus, but the wind pulls at you, as if urging you to follow it, to trace its path through time, to uncover the truth that lies hidden in the shadows. There is something unsettling in the way the storm moves, something older and darker than any divine lineage. The storm is not merely a god's weapon, it is a reminder that even the gods themselves do not know everything, that there are forces at play beyond their understanding, forces that may one day tear the heavens apart. Enlil was the master of the winds, but was he the true master of his own creation? Or was he merely a servant to something much older, much darker than even the gods could comprehend? You stand still, the storm swirling around you. The answer lies out there, beyond the horizon, in the spaces between the winds. And perhaps, if you listen closely enough, the storm itself will reveal it to you. For now, the question lingers unanswered as the winds carry Enlil's name across the land. The winds pick up, whirling in an almost frenzied dance, pulling at you, urging you forward as you follow the traces of Enlil's forgotten reign. The whispers of the storm god grow louder, more insistent, as though the very air itself carries the weight of his long-lost fury. And it is in the roiling storm, in the quiet yet violent shifts of the air, that you begin to feel the true depth of Enlil's power, not just as a god of creation, but as a harbinger of destruction. Enlil's storms were never mere tempests of nature. No, his breath was the power of the earth itself, capable of splitting the sky, turning mountains to rubble, and flooding entire civilizations beneath the weight of his rage. You stand now on the edge of what was once a thriving city, its bones buried beneath sand and time, swallowed by the earth in an event whispered about in forgotten corners of myth. It is said that Enlil's rage once shattered the land or the very earth asunder, causing rivers to overflow and cities to vanish beneath waves of wind and water. The earth, in its fragility, could not withstand the fury of the god who breathed the storm. The wind carried his anger, and with it, the world trembled. In the sacred texts, there are fragments that speak of this event, though the details are sparse, hidden behind veils of superstition and fear. The wind swept through ancient cities, tearing down stone walls and scattering the remains of empires like dust in the air. Entire civilizations were lost to the tempest, and the winds carried their stories into silence. It was a cataclysm, but it was not one of nature alone. It was the work of Enlil, whose breath shattered the earth and reshaped the world itself. But why? Why did the god of wind, once a creator, become such a force of devastation? The ancient stories do not say. Some claim it was a divine punishment, a moment of wrath unleashed upon a world that had lost its way. Others say that Enlil's storm was not born from anger alone, but from something deeper, a divine warning. A message carried in the winds that mortals fail to understand. As you walk through the ruins, you can feel the ghosts of the past whispers of those who lived here before, their lives swept away in a storm that no one could control. Were they lost to the fury of Enlil's breath, or were they victims of something darker, something older than the storm itself? The ruins speak of something forgotten, something that echoes in the howling winds. It is as if the earth itself carries the memory of Enlil's rage, and the winds, in their restless flight, are the only things that still remember the destruction he wrought. The mystery remains, lingering in the quiet spaces between the gusts. Was Enlil's storm a form of divine punishment? Or was it something more, an uncontrollable force unleashed when the gods themselves could no longer maintain order? And was there a deeper reason for the destruction? Something beyond the mortal understanding of wrath? You pause in the center of the ruins, your breath caught in your throat as you listen to the wind. It seems to carry with it a sorrowful sound, a low rumble like the remnants of a forgotten prayer. There are no answers here, only the silence of those who perished in the storm. But the question lingers in your mind. Was this destruction truly Enlil's wrath? Or was it the storm's own hunger, a force that once unleashed could not be tamed? The storm god's breath is not just wind, it is a force of nature, a force that can tear apart the very foundations of existence. And as the wind continues to howl around you, you realize that the destruction was not the end. No, the storm, once it began, was never truly over. It lingers even now in the places where the earth was shattered. The wind carries the memory of what was lost, and what remains is a world forever marked by the power of Enlil's breath. The question remains unanswered, echoing in the storm. What was the true cause of the destruction? Was it punishment, hunger, or something even darker? You may never know. But the storm, it seems, will never let you forget. The winds grow sharper now, as if Enlil himself is leaning closer, whispering forgotten secrets to the air. The ruins around you seem to tremble with the weight of something ancient, something buried. You can almost feel the presence of the priests, those devoted followers of Enlil who, in their desperate worship, sought to channel the storm god's breath for their own purposes. But their rites, their sacred rituals, were never meant to be seen. They were forbidden acts, performed on mountaintops, in hidden sanctuaries, rituals to invoke the storm, to summon Enlil's power in a form beyond even his divine reach. It is said that these priests were not mere worshippers, they were stormbinders. Those who sought to harness the very forces of nature. They gathered in sacred places, in the high wind-swept temples hidden from mortal eyes, where the wind carried Enlil's breath with greater intensity. It is there, on the highest peaks, that the priests would conduct their forbidden rites, calling upon the storm not as a servant, but as a divine partner. The rituals were said to be complex, requiring ancient incantations whispered in the language of the wind itself. These priests, draped in the robes of silence, would stand before a great altar carved from stone, their voices blending with the howls of the storm as they invoked the god's breath. The rituals were meant to control the storm, to direct its fury in specific ways, to bend the winds to their will. But the wind is not easily controlled. Some say that the priests were foolhardy in their attempts. For Enlil's storm is not something that can be bound by mortal hands. No, it is a force that surpasses all understanding. And it is whispered in the darkest corners of myth that during one such ritual, something went terribly wrong. A gust of wind more furious than any mortal could imagine ripped through the sacred temple, tearing apart the altar and scattering the priests like dry leaves in the wind. Some say the storm god himself was displeased, for it is said that Enlil's power cannot be contained, not even by the most devoted of his followers. But there are other whispers, darker and more sinister. Some believe that the priests were not merely destroyed by the storm, but that they were consumed by it, taken into the storm itself, never to return. It is said that they were drawn into the very heart of Enlil's breath, lost to the storm that they had sought to command. What became of them, no one knows. Some say their spirits still wander, trapped in the winds, forever bound to the god they sought to control. The forbidden rituals performed by these priests were not just acts of devotion, they were attempts to harness something far beyond human comprehension. They believed that by channeling the power of the storm, they could transcend mortality itself. Perhaps they thought that by becoming one with the storm, they could gain eternal life or power beyond measure. But in their arrogance, they may have overlooked one crucial truth. The storm does not bow to anyone. The wind cannot be controlled. As you stand in the shadow of the ruins, you cannot help but wonder what these priests truly sought. What was the purpose of their forbidden rites? Did they believe they could command Enlil's breath? Or did they seek something far more elusive, mortality perhaps? Or a union with the divine that would place them on equal footing with the gods themselves? There is no answer to this question, not one that can be understood by mortal minds. The storm speaks only in whispers, in the language of the winds, and the priests, it seems, are lost to those whispers now. They sought to control the breath of Enlil, but it was the breath of the storm that ultimately consumed them. You feel the winds pick up, and as they swirl around you, you sense the weight of their knowledge, of the ancient rituals, of the forbidden rites performed by the Stormbinders. The winds seem to carry with them the memory of those lost priests. Their voices now nothing more than echoes in the storm. But there is something else too, a lingering question. An unsolved mystery that hangs in the air like a storm cloud on the horizon. What were the priests truly trying to achieve? What was the secret they sought to unlock within Enlil's breath? Did they uncover something that should have remained hidden? The answers, it seems, are lost in the storm, carried away with the winds that have swept through the ruins and forgotten temples. And yet you feel the pull of the storm. The whispers are growing louder, urging you forward, deeper into the forgotten knowledge. For even in their failure, those priests left behind something, a clue, perhaps a forgotten truth hidden in the winds. If you listen closely, you may hear it. The winds howl as you move further, and with them, a shadow of loss falls over you. The air feels heavier now, laden with a sorrow that clings to your skin like a storm's residue. For you have come to the most tragic part of Enlil's story, when the god of wind and storm was cast out of the heavens. The mighty Enlil, once revered by all, now wandered alone. His breath no longer a force of creation, but a whisper of fury and madness. It was not always like this. In the early days, Enlil stood among the gods as one of the most powerful. The ruler of the skies, the one whose breath shaped the very earth. His voice was the storm itself, a force so overwhelming that even the highest gods trembled before it. But then, something happened. Betrayal whispered in the silence between the winds. A betrayal so deep, so profound, that even Enlil's once indomitable will could not withstand it. Some say the betrayal came from the gods themselves, those who had once stood by Enlil's side. In the halls of the divine, whispers began to spread. The gods grew fearful of Enlil's power, of his control over the storm that had shaped the very world. They believed his rage would one day consume everything, that his storm, once an agent of creation, would turn into an unstoppable force of destruction. And so, the gods decided to cast him out. It was not a simple act of rejection. No, it was a complex and cruel ritual. Enlil was not killed, but stripped of his dominion, banished from the heavens to roam the earth as a forgotten god. His breath, once so powerful, was now confined to the winds, force that could no longer shape the world or command the skies. His name was erased from the divine tongues, his temples abandoned, and his followers lost to the winds. But why? Why did the gods, those who once revered Enlil, cast him down? Was it fear, jealousy, or something darker? The answers are scattered across time, buried beneath layers of silence. Some say it was an act of necessity. The gods could no longer allow such a volatile force to roam unchecked. Others believe that the betrayal came from a darker place, one rooted in the very nature of the divine order itself. There is a deeper truth to this exile, one that goes beyond simple politics or power struggles. For in casting Enlil out, the gods unknowingly set into motion the unraveling of their own divine order. The winds that Enlil once commanded, the storms that he could summon, began to shift. His exile did not mark the end of his power, but the beginning of a new, more dangerous phase. The storm goddess breath now carried madness with it, a chaos that even the gods could not foresee. In his exile, Enlil became something else, a forgotten god, a shadow of his former self, wandering the earth in search of something that could fill the void left by his banishment. The storms he once commanded now took on a more erratic and unpredictable nature. The world trembled, but not with the divine precision it once knew. Now, there was only the chaos of a god lost, a storm that could not be contained. You can almost hear his voice in the wind, a mournful cry carried on the breeze. It is a voice that speaks of regret, of lost glory, and of a power that no longer belongs to him. The very air seems to hum with the memory of his fall, a reminder that even the greatest gods are not immune to exile. But there is a deeper question, one that lingers in the silence after the storm. What did Enlil become in his exile? Was he truly lost, or did he find something in the chaos that was once his dominion? Some believe that the storms he now commands are not the wild rages of a god cast aside, but the workings of a divine mind slowly unraveling, a god who, in his solitude, has begun to lose his grip on the very forces he once mastered. The exile of Enlil is not merely a story of loss. It is a story of transformation, of a god who, in his banishment, has become something different, something darker. The winds that carry his name now whisper of madness and desolation, of a power that cannot be controlled, even by the gods themselves. As you stand on the precipice of his fall, you can feel that the storm is closer now. The wind's heavy with the weight of his exile. The whispers grow louder, more insistent, calling you to follow the path of the storm. And in those whispers, there is something you must know, something the gods themselves feared. Enlil's exile was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new, terrifying chapter in the story of the storm god. The winds are restless, and you feel a chill run through you. Enlil's exile was not a punishment. It was a transformation. And it is in the chaos of his fall that his true power was unlocked power, that even now waits its reaches of the storm, awaits its reckoning. The question hangs in the air. Was Enlil ever truly cast out? Or did he choose exile himself? To walk the world with a fury that no god could tame? The winds grow restless as you continue to wander, your footsteps tracing the forgotten path of Enlil's journey through the void. The storm god, cast out and lost to time, has become something far darker than the ruler of the skies he once was. The air seems to crackle with tension, each gust of wind carrying an unsettling maddening whisper, not just of the earth, but of the gods themselves. It is said that when Enlil was exiled, his rage was not just a divine anger, but a madness that began to infect him. As the storms grew more erratic and unpredictable, so did the mind of the god who had once been its master. The winds, once a symbol of divine order, now became the voice of his fractured mind. Enlil's storms no longer served the purpose of creation or destruction, but instead spoke of a deeper, or chaotic force, the storm of a god unmoored from his purpose, lost to a madness that neither gods nor mortals could comprehend. In the silence between the gusts, you can hear the faintest whispers, the voices of the gods who once stood beside Enlil, watching as his mind unraveled. They were afraid, some say, afraid that his madness would spread, that the storms he conjured would not only destroy the world, but tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. These gods who had once basked in the power of Enlil's breath now feared what he had become. There is one tale, ancient and shrouded in mystery, that speaks of a secret council of gods who gathered in the heavens to discuss Enlil's fate. They feared that his growing madness would soon spill over into the heavens, bringing the storm god's rage to all corners of existence. It was in this council that the winds of Enlil first began to whisper not of creation, but of destruction of force that could unravel the gods themselves. But what was it exactly that drove Enlil to madness? The whispers offer only fragments of an answer. Some say it was the betrayal of his fellow gods, the rejection, the exile that shattered his mind. Others believe it was the very nature of his power that twisted his thoughts. Enlil had always been a force of chaos, a god whose breath could reshape the world at will. But to be cast out, to have his power stripped away, was more than a loss of dominion. It was the loss of his very self. In the lonely hours of his exile, Enlil could hear the storm within him, calling to him, urging him to remember what he had once been. The storm that had once been a tool of creation now whispered of things darker still, of a power that lay hidden within the storm's fury, power that could reshape the very boundaries of the heavens. The whispers of the storm were not just the winds of madness, they were the winds of forgotten knowledge, of forbidden truths that had been sealed away by the gods. As the storm raged around you, you feel the weight of these whispers, heavy in the air. There are secrets here, hidden in the winds, in the madness that has consumed Enlil. The storm god's descent into madness was not just a tragedy, it was the beginning of something much darker. The winds he commands are no longer the breath of creation. No, they are the breath of something far older, a force of nature that exists outside the realms of the gods, something that Enlil himself has come to understand in the depths of his exile. What were these forgotten truths? What secrets did Enlil uncover in the chaos of his mind? The winds, it seems, carry no answers, only more questions. Yet as you listen to the howl of the storm, You cannot shake the feeling that the answers lie hidden in the very heart of the madness that now defines Enlil. It is said that in his madness, Enlil sought to reach out to the other gods to call them back to him. The winds that now carried his voice were not the winds of the heavens, but the winds of a god exiled, a god who no longer held the power of creation but instead became a force of destruction. But when the gods refused to answer, when they turned their backs on him, Enlil's madness deepened. And so the storms grew louder, more violent, until they began to echo through the very fabric of existence. The question now lingers in the storm. Did Enlil truly lose himself to madness, or was it the winds themselves that revealed something deeper, something the gods had sealed away? The storm speaks only in riddles, in the language of the wind, and the answers you seek are just beyond reach. But one thing is clear: the storm, once a force of creation, has now become a symbol of a god's unraveling. A reminder that even the mightiest of beings can fall into darkness, lost to the chaos they once controlled. As the wind swirls around you, you feel the pull of the storm, its whispers calling to you. It's beckoning you to follow its path into the madness that Enlil has become. The answer lies within the storm. But it is a truth that may forever remain elusive, hidden beneath layers of chaos and destruction. Storm is not just a god's rage. It is a force of untold power, and it is now, as ever, a reflection of Enlil's broken mind. What once was a divine gift has become a curse, one that carries with it the echoes of forgotten gods and the madness that consumes all who dare listen too closely. The winds are relentless now, a constant, gnawing presence at the edges of your mind. The storm of Enlil rages not just around you, but within you, its presence a haunting, its power a lingering echo. But amidst the chaos, you begin to feel the pull of something deeper, something buried within the storm's fury. A temple lost to time rises in your thoughts, an ancient place once dedicated to the worship of Enlil, hidden away from mortal eyes, a place where the god's followers performed rites in his honor, but no longer. The temple is now abandoned, its walls cracked, its stones weathered by centuries of neglect. Long ago, this temple stood as a beacon to the god who ruled the skies, a place where the winds carried his breath and his power was felt in every gust. The priests who served there were not just mere worshippers, they were stormbinders, those who sought to commune with the god himself, to understand the very essence of the winds. They believed that by invoking the power of Enlil, they could channel the storm's fury, bending it to their will. But their devotion came with a cost that none could have foreseen. The temple was said to be a marvel, built atop a sacred mountain where the winds howled with divine force. It was said that on the highest platform of the temple, the priests would stand, offering prayers to Enlil in the hope of gaining his favor. The rituals performed there were complex, requiring the participation of the most devoted followers, who would chant incantations that resonated with the very pulse of the storm. In those moments, the wind would grow heavy with power, swirling around the priests as they sought to commune with the divine. But there was one ritual, one forbidden act that sealed the temple's fate. The sacred text, buried in the dust of time, speaks of a moment when the priests sought to invoke a deeper power, something beyond even Enlil's dominion. They believed that by invoking the storm's full fury, they could unlock a divine truth, a secret hidden within the very fabric of the wind. But as the chant grew louder and the winds began to howl with increasing violence, something went horribly wrong. The storm, once a servant of the god, became something else, a force too powerful to control. The winds that surrounded the temple began to twist and warp, their fury building to a crescendo. The temple, which had once stood as a testament to Enlil's power, was ripped apart by the very storm it sought to harness. The altar was shattered, the stones cracked, and the priests were swept away by the raging winds, never to be seen again. The temple was lost to the storm, buried beneath the very winds it had tried to control. But the curse of the winds did not end. With the destruction of the temple, no. It is said that those who sought to control the storm were themselves consumed by it. The priests, who had once chanted to the storm, became part of it, lost in the maelstrom, their spirits now wandering in the winds that Enlil had once commanded. Their names are forgotten, their faces lost to time, but their souls remain trapped in the storm. echoing with the prayers they once offered to the god they sought to control. There is a symbol found among the ruins of the temple, etched into the walls and scattered across the fallen stones. It is a swirling, tempestuous spiral and image that seems to pulse with the very energy of the storm itself. Some say it represents the eye of the storm, the calm center of chaos. Others believe it is the symbol of the curse itself, a reminder that those who seek to control the storm will be consumed by it. The curse of the winds is not just a tale of destruction. It is a warning, one that has echoed through the ages. The winds, once servants of the gods, are now a force unto themselves beyond mortal comprehension. The storm is no longer something that can be controlled or harnessed. It is a living thing, a force that devours everything in its path, from the gods to the mortals who dare to challenge it. You feel the winds grow colder, the storm closing in around you, so the curse of the lost temple is now descending upon you. The air crackles with the remnants of forgotten rituals, and you cannot shake the feeling that the spirits of those lost priests are still here, still waiting in the wind. Their souls, bound to the storm, cry out for release, but the storm does not answer. It never answers. As you stand amidst the ruins, you wonder, what was the true cost of the priest's ambition? What secret did they hope to unlock by summoning the full force of the storm? Is it a divine truth? Or something darker? Something better left forgotten? The storm, it seems, holds the answers. But it is a knowledge that is not meant to be understood by mortal minds. The curse of the winds is not just the destruction of the temple. It is the loss of understanding, the severing of the bond between the gods and their creations. It is a reminder that some forces are beyond our control, and that even the most devout worshippers can be swept away by the very power they seek to harness. The storm is always with you now, its whispers lingering in the wind. And you realize with a shiver that perhaps the greatest curse of all is not the destruction of the temple, but the knowledge that the storm still remembers. The storm remembers those who tried to control it, and it will never forget. The storm is growing, pulling tighter around you. The winds swirl with increasing intensity, their gusts now sharp, cutting through the silence like an ancient song you cannot fully hear. In this maelstrom, you feel something else, something more than the physical storm. It is a presence, something ancient, something that has always existed beneath the winds, beneath the clouds. A hidden truth veiled by the storm's fury. The winds seem to whisper this truth in hushed tones, their voices only half caught by your ears. And in the heart of the storm, there is something you cannot escape. It is a symbol, one that has been hidden from mortal eyes for eons. You've seen it before, carved into the walls of the ruined temple, etched in ancient scripts that no longer hold meaning. A symbol of a swirling vortex, an Ian image that has captivated the minds of scholars and mystics alike. But this symbol is not merely an artistic design. No, it is the key to understanding Enlil's true power, to understanding the storm itself. The Eye of the Storm. That is what it is called in the old texts. It is said to represent a place untouched by the fury of the winds, a calm center amidst the chaos. But the Eye of the Storm is more than just a symbol of peace. It is a window into something deeper, something divine. It is a glimpse into the heart of Enlil's breath, into the essence of the storm god himself. Yet there is a terrifying mystery that surrounds this symbol. For to gaze upon the Eye of the Storm is not to find solace. No, it is to find a truth so profound that it can tear the very fabric of reality. It is said that those who have dared to look upon the eye have vanished without a trace. Lost to the winds, consumed by the very force they sought to understand, the storms, it seems, will not allow their secrets to be uncovered. Is it a divine portal, a window into Enlil's true essence? Or is it something darker, something that should never be seen by mortal eyes? The symbol is both sacred and cursed, a reminder that some knowledge is not meant to be understood. The ancients believed that the eye was a gateway to forbidden wisdom, wisdom that could grant the beholder power beyond mortal comprehension. To gaze into the eye was to understand the very nature of creation, to glimpse the forces that shape the world. But to see that truth came at a cost. The storm god's breath, once a force of life, would twist and consume all who dared look too closely. The Eye of the Storm is not merely a symbol of divine power, it is a harbinger of madness. As you stand in the heart of the storm, you feel the weight of the symbol pressing in on you, the eye of the storm calling to you from the depths of the winds. You sense its power, its promise, and yet you are terrified. What lies behind the eye? What truth does it conceal, and why is it forbidden? It is a question that has driven many before you to madness. A question that has no answer, only more questions. Some say that Enlil himself once gazed into the eye, that he alone knew the truth hidden within its swirling depths. But what price did he pay for that knowledge? What part of him was lost in the storm, in the eye, that he could never reclaim? The winds, once a force of creation, now seem to carry only the weight of that knowledge that can never be understood. You look around, the winds howling louder now, and you feel the pull of the storm deep within you. The eye of the storm is not just a symbol, it is a presence, a force that lies hidden within the very heart of Enlil's breath. You wonder, if you gaze into it, will you see the world as it truly is? Or will you lose yourself to the storm, as so many have before you? You know this, the eye is not to be trifled with, and yet you feel the storm whispering to you, urging you to look. The winds grow heavier, and the answer, whatever it is, feels just beyond reach. And so you stand on the precipice, the storm swirling around you. The eye of the storm looms large in your thoughts, its power undiminished by time, its mystery still unsolved. Perhaps it will always remain so, an ancient, forbidden truth that no mortal is meant to understand. The winds howl louder, as if in agreement. Still the storm continues, whispering its secrets to the world. But the eye of the storm will remain hidden, always just out of reach, its truth locked away in the heart of the tempest. Perhaps some knowledge is best left unspoken, some symbols best left unseen, and so you turn away, for now. The storm will not reveal its secrets easily, but its presence will never leave you. It will follow you, always, waiting for the day when you will finally seek the truth that lies behind the eye. The winds have taken on a strange, unsettling quality, carrying with them an echo of something lost, something darker. The storm rages on, relentless, as though it is now an entity of its own, twisted and bound by its creator's pain and anger. Enlil, the god of wind and storm, once the ruler of the skies, now seems a mere fragment of his former self, a broken god, consumed by a final, unfathomable rage. What was the final moment of Enlil's power? The storm carries fragments of the answer, but it is never complete, always just out of reach. Some say that in his madness, Enlil sought to destroy the very heavens he had once ruled, to tear apart the sky and the earth in an act of divine retribution. Others believe that his final rage was a desperate plea for understanding, a cry from a god who had been cast aside, exiled by his own kin. The texts are vague, fragmented, scattered pieces of a once great story that now only exist in whispers. What is clear, however, is that something changed in Enlil during his exile. Storms grew wilder, more destructive, more erratic. The winds that once carried divine wisdom now seemed to carry the breath of something else, something darker. Something that threatened to consume not just the world, but the very fabric of existence itself. Was it simply rage, a god's anger turned inward, or was there something more? Some say that Enlil discovered a secret, a truth so profound, so ancient, that it shattered his mind. A truth hidden in the very storm he had once controlled. What did Enlil learn in the depths of his madness, and what did it cost him? The gods themselves feared the answer, for they knew that the storm's rage, once unleashed, could never be tamed again. The storm is not merely a reflection of Enlil's fury, it is the embodiment of a god, his fall from grace. A god who once shaped the very world now consumed by the very forces he had once controlled. The winds seemed to carry with them the final remnants of Enlil's divine breath, twisted into something else, something alien, something that even the gods dare not confront. There are whispers of an ancient prophecy, one that foretold Enlil's final act. Some say that the storm god's rage was inevitable, that he would one day reach the point of no return, where the storm would consume everything, from the heavens to the earth. Others believe that Enlil's final act was a deliberate one, a choice to sever the ties that bound him to the gods, to cast aside his divine heritage and embrace the chaos of the storm. Was Enlil's final act one of destruction, or was it a divine sacrifice? Did he unleash his rage upon the world to purge it of its corruption, Or was it a manifestation of a broken god's mind? The mystery remains unsolved, a riddle that time cannot answer. But the storm itself speaks of something darker, of a god who, in his madness, unlocked a power that even the heavens could not contain. And yet there are those who believe that Enlil's final rage was not his own doing, that something else, something older, had taken hold of him. Perhaps the storm god was not merely driven by anger, but by a force beyond his understanding. What if the winds that he had once controlled were not just the breath of a god, but a manifestation of a primal force, one that sought to destroy the very world that had been shaped by divine hands? The answers remain hidden in the storm, locked away in the howling winds that carry the echoes of Enlil's final moments. Perhaps the god himself no longer remembers what happened in those final, desperate moments. But the storm, it seems, never forgets. And it is here, in the heart of the tempest, that the truth lies buried, waiting for the one who dares to seek it. The winds shift around you, and you are left with the question, was Enlil's final act one of divine destruction? Or was it the unleashing of a power far greater than any god could control? The answer remains a mystery, swirling in the winds that carry the breath of the storm. The storm is not done with you yet. It whispers, ever louder, as though urging you forward, to seek the truth hidden in the tempest. The winds howl, and you are caught once again in their grip. As though Enlil's rage is not merely a part of the past, but something that still echoes in the world today. The winds are no longer just a presence. They are a call, an irresistible summons, to something that is neither life nor death, but something that exists in the space between. The storm's voice grows softer now, almost as if it is trying to draw you into the depths of a forgotten secret. There is a hidden ritual, a sacred ceremony, lost to time, that once promised the rebirth of Enlil. It is whispered that, in the final days of his exile, Enlil sought to renew himself, to reclaim the power that had been taken from him.
Ow.
This was no ordinary ritual. It was the last, desperate attempt of a broken god to return to his former glory. You hear it in the winds, the remnants of an ancient chant, a melody that has been passed down through the ages, hidden in the folds of the storm itself. The ritual, said to be performed in the eye of the storm, called for the summoning of a force greater than even Enlil's breath, force that could bring about his rebirth, not as a god of wind and sky, but as something far more powerful, far more terrifying. It was a ritual of sacrifice, of blood and breath, and it required the most devoted of followers. Only the most faithful priests, those who had never wavered in their worship, could perform the rites. It is said that these priests stood at the center of the storm, offering their lives to the wind, calling upon the god's fury to return. They believed that through their sacrifice, Enlil would be reborn, not in the same form, but as something new, something stronger, something unstoppable. But the ritual was never completed. There are no surviving accounts of the full ceremony, only fragments of scattered texts and whispered tales that speak of the terrible cost. Some say that the ritual required the sacrifice of an entire temple, the very foundation of the divine world itself. That, in calling upon Enlil's breath, the priests invoked a power so dark that it threatened to consume the gods themselves. And when the ritual was interrupted by divine intervention, by a catastrophe, or by the madness that had already taken hold of Enlil, the storm turned against them. The winds became unmanageable, twisting into a vortex of pure chaos, and the temple was swallowed whole by the fury of the storm. It is said that the priests, once devoted to Enlil, became part of the storm they had sought to control. Their souls, bound to the winds, were lost to the very force they had tried to summon. The last remnants of the ritual are now nothing more than whispers, fragments carried on the winds that circle the ruins of the temple, waiting for the day when the storm will return. The ritual was meant to be the end of Enlil's exile, the final step in his journey back to power. But instead, it marked the end of something else, the final unraveling of a god who had already been consumed by the very winds he had once commanded. The storm, once a tool of creation, became the vehicle of Enlil's destruction. The ritual was never completed, and so the god remained lost, trapped in the storm that he had unleashed. But still, There are those who believe that the ritual was not a failure. They believe that somewhere deep in the storm, the ritual still lives waiting to be completed. For even a broken god, even one exiled and lost, can return. And in the whispers of the wind, there are those who say that Enlil's breath will one day return in full force, sweeping away the world as it once did, bringing about a new creation born from the chaos of the storm. You feel the wind shift, and something deep within you stirs. The ritual was never finished, but that does not mean it is over. Perhaps somewhere someone will complete it. Perhaps the storm is waiting for the moment when it will be reborn, just as the god himself sought to be reborn. The ritual is hidden in the wind, a secret that has been carried across time, a secret that will one day change the world. The storm whispers louder now, as though it knows that you are close to uncovering the final truth. The ritual is not a relic of the past. It is a promise that Enlil's power will return whether by choice or by force. The winds carry his breath, and though it may be scattered and fragmented, it is still there, hidden in the storm, waiting to be called upon again. And so, you stand at the edge of the storm, knowing that there is more to this story. You are close to understanding what Enlil sought in the end. But the winds, relentless and unforgiving, will not let you see the full truth yet. The storm will not give up its secrets so easily. The ritual remains unfinished, and the god remains lost, but not forever. The winds carry a promise of return, and they whisper it to you now. The winds howl, a mournful cry, as though they remember something that should have never been forgotten. You feel the weight of the storm around you, its presence no longer a distant hum, but a suffocating force, heavy with the promise of something terrible. Enlil's breath stirs again, though it is no longer the breath of a god who once shaped the heavens. It is a fury untamed, a madness unleashed upon the world. Enlil's exile was meant to sever his connection to the heavens, to isolate him in the chaos of his own creation. But exile is not the end of a god's story, it is only a turning point. The winds that Enlil once controlled now belong to something darker. Something that is twisted over time, turning into a force that even the gods cannot tame. There are whispers among the winds, fragments of a forgotten prophecy that speak of a return of a storm reborn. Enlil, it is said, will return, but not as he once was. The storm that once carried the breath of creation now carries the breath of destruction. A god unshackled from the chains that once bound him. The winds that howl around you are not just the breath of Enlil, they are the breath of something older, something primordial, something that the storm god himself may have never fully understood. The return of Enlil is not a simple resurrection, it is a rebirth through chaos, a storm that will unmake the world and remake it in a form unknown. The storm will not be a force that shapes it, will be a force that consumes. The winds that once brought life will now carry only madness, twisting the minds of mortals and gods alike. In the shattered remnants of Enlil's reign, there are signs that the storm has already begun to stir. The winds are no longer as they once were. They are restless, agitated, filled with a fury that cannot be quenched. The world feels the storm's return, even if they cannot name it. There are tales of strange winds sweeping through cities, of storms appearing out of nowhere, wreaking havoc on all who stand in their path. The signs are there, subtle at first, but growing stronger with each passing day. It is said that when Enlil returns, he will not return alone. The storm will carry with it the spirits of those lost in his exile, the priests, the followers, and those who dared to summon his fury. Their souls, once lost to the winds, will return with him, forming a tempest of unimaginable power. The storm will be both a force of destruction and a gathering of spirits, a collision of the past and the present. Enlil's return will not be a singular event. It will be the culmination of all that he was, all that he became, and all that he could never escape. As the storm intensifies, you can feel it, the pull of something dark, something ancient, something that has been waiting for this moment. The winds grow colder, and the air seems to crackle with the tension of an impending cataclysm. The return of Enlil is not just a myth, it is a force that is already at work, shaping the world in ways you cannot fully comprehend. The question remains, will Enlil's return bring salvation, or will it be the final reckoning, a moment when the storm consumes all? Some say that the storm will cleanse the world, wiping away the corruption that has taken root. Others fear that it will be the end of all things, a destruction so complete that nothing will remain. But no one truly knows what Enlil's return will bring, only that it will be a force unlike anything the world has ever known. As you stand on the edge of the storm, you can feel it closing in on you. The winds are no longer just the breath of a god. They are the breath of a god who has lost himself, who has become something else entirely. Enlil's return is inevitable, and with it comes the winds of madness, unbound and uncontrolled. The storm that once shaped the world will now reshape it in a new image, one that no mortal will be able to understand. The winds seem to carry a warning. When Enlil returns, the world will be forever changed. What was once known will be undone, and only the storm will remain. So the question now lingers in the air. Will you survive the storm? Or will you be swept away in its fury, lost to the winds of a god who has become madness incarnate? Storm will tell you soon enough. The return of Enlil is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And the winds are already whispering his name. The storm reaches its peak, an overwhelming force of nature that drowns out all other sounds. The winds grow louder, roaring like 1,000 voices crying out in anguish. You feel the very earth tremble beneath your feet as the storm gathers its strength, twisting the sky into an unnatural swirl. Enlil's return is no longer a whisper in the wind, it is a thunderous roar. The final act of a god who has been exiled too long, consumed by his own fury. The collapse of the sky, the very concept seems impossible, doesn't it? But in the presence of the storm, nothing seems impossible. As the winds tear at the earth, you begin to understand. Enlil's final act is not merely the return of a forgotten god. It is the end of something far more profound. The sky itself, the very boundary between the divine and the mortal, is being torn apart. What was once solid, what was once stable, is now unraveling, as if the storm itself is rewriting the laws of the universe. The ancient prophecies spoke of the collapse of the sky, of a time when the winds would rise so high that they would break the heavens and earth apart. The gods had always feared this moment, the moment when the storm would return to its true form, a force that would unmake the very foundations of existence. The storm is not just a wrathful god's return. It is a reckoning, a final act that will reset the balance of the world, tearing down the divine order in the process. There is an unsolved mystery at the heart of this collapse. The gods themselves have never been able to explain the origin of the storm's power. Some say it was a natural force, one that existed before the gods themselves. Others believe it was a creation of the divine, forged by Enlil's own breath and locked away in the heavens. But there is no certainty. There are whispers that Enlil's storm was not just a godly creation, it was the storm of the universe itself. A primordial force that existed before time, before creation. If that is true, then the collapse of the sky is not simply a destruction of the world, it is a return to the beginning of all things. As the winds continue to rage, you begin to see the storm itself is not merely a force of destruction. It is a force of rebirth, a return to the original chaos that birthed the world. The collapse of the sky is not the end, but the beginning of a new cycle. The world as you know it will be erased, and from its ashes, a new reality will emerge. Shaped by the breath of a god who has always existed beyond time, beyond creation. The gods, once rulers of the heavens, are powerless to stop it. They know that Enlil's storm is not something they can control, not something they can bend to their will. The storm is beyond them, a force of nature that even they cannot tame. It is the final truth that the gods have long tried to ignore. They are not the masters of the world. The storm is, as the sky shudders above you, you are filled with a sense of inevitability. The collapse is coming. The winds will tear apart everything you know, and in their place, something else will rise, a world where the storm is not just a force of destruction, but the force of creation itself. The gods will fall, their power scattered by the winds, and a new world will begin. This is the final act, the last breath of a god who has been lost and found, who has been broken and rebuilt. You cannot turn away from it. The winds pull you in, and as the sky fractures above you, you know that you are witnessing the end of one world and the birth of another. The storm does not just destroy, it transforms. It unravels the old and makes way for the new. And in the eye of the storm, there is a terrifying clarity. The collapse of the sky is not the death of the world. It is its rebirth. And the winds that will sweep across the earth will carry with them the echoes of the gods who have fallen, of the forgotten ones who were once worshipped, and of a God who sought to remake the world in his own image. You are here, at the center of it all, watching as the storm, once the breath of creation, now becomes the breath of the end. The sky cracks open, and you hear the whispers of Enlil the god, who once ruled the winds. The storm god, who was exiled and forgotten, now returning to claim what was always his. The collapse of the sky is not the end of the world. It is the beginning of something else. The winds howl louder, and the storm begins to consume everything. The winds have reached their crescendo, and yet, as the storm swells, you begin to feel something else's shift in the very air itself. The deafening howl of the tempest begins to fade, its fury dissipating like a fading dream, and a strange stillness falls over the world. The collapse of the sky has not destroyed everything, as the gods once feared. No, the storm has passed. The winds are now nothing more than whispers, carrying with them the echoes of a forgotten age. Enlil's presence, once all-consuming, has receded. The storm has run its course, but the world feels different now. There is a palpable emptiness in the air, a silence that stretches far beyond the winds that remain. The skies, once torn apart by the fury of Enlil's breath, are now calm to calm. The world, stripped of its chaos, seems to be holding its breath, waiting for something. But what? What does the world look like after the storm? After the god who once ruled the winds has been exiled, broken, and reborn. You stand amidst the remnants of the storm, the earth still trembling with the aftershocks of Enlil's return. The air is heavy with the weight of what has happened. And yet, as the wind dies down, you feel a sense of mourning, a quiet sadness that hangs in the atmosphere. Enlil, once the god of creation and destruction, is no longer the force he once was. His breath, his storm has passed, and the world that remains feels empty in its wake. But even in this stillness, there is something new, a lingering trace of Enlil's presence. The winds are not gone, not truly. They are simply ... changed. The storm god's influence is still here, the subtle shift of the air, and the way the winds stir just beyond the horizon. The storm may have passed, but its echoes remain, lingering in the silence. The gods, those who once feared Enlil's return, are no longer in control. The world has changed, but the storm god has not been erased. His breath is still alive, still powerful, though it no longer holds the same dominion over the world. It is as though the storm has become part of the earth itself, woven into the fabric of creation, but no longer a god to be worshipped or feared. You walk through the quiet remnants of the storm, feeling the weight of the world's transformation. The collapse of the sky was not the end. It was a moment of revelation. A reminder that even the most powerful gods are but fleeting echoes in the wind. Enlil, the storm god, is not gone. He has simply become something else, something older, something more deeply intertwined with the world around you. His presence lingers in the winds, in the clouds, in the very breath of the earth. But it is no longer the force of creation. It is the force of nature itself. There is an unsettling peace in this world without Enlil. A world where the storm is no longer a god to be reckoned with, but a force of nature, untamed, unpredictable, and forever changing. The gods are gone, and the world is left to drift, its fate uncertain. What happens to a world that no longer has gods to guide it, to shape its destiny? What happens when the storm is no longer a divine presence, but just a part of the earth's natural cycle? Perhaps this is what Enlil always sought: to return to the earth, to become a part of the winds that carry the breath of the world. Perhaps his final act was not to destroy the heavens, but to dissolve the boundary between the divine and the mortal, to become the storm itself, force that cannot be controlled, that cannot be destroyed, but that will forever shape the world in ways both seen and unseen. You stand at the edge of this new world where the storm has passed and the echoes of Enlil's breath are all that remain. The winds stir gently, carrying with them a faint, distant hum. The storm is over, but the world feels unfinished, as though it is still waiting for something, still holding its breath, unsure of what comes next. But one thing is clear: the winds will never be the same again. Enlil's legacy, the storm that once defined the heavens and the earth, will forever echo in the world. And as long as the winds blow, his presence will remain silent, eternal, and ever-changing. The storm has passed, but the gods are not forgotten. Perhaps somewhere deep in the heart of the wind, Enlil still waits. As the winds grow quieter, as the storm begins to retreat into the horizon, there is something bittersweet about the calm that follows. The world is not yet reborn, but it is no longer the same. There is a hollow space where the storm once roared, a gap between the heavens and the earth, between what was and what will be. The winds that Enlil once controlled are now no longer just the breath of a god. It had become something else, something more primal. In their silence, you can hear the echoes of an age long gone, of a god who was once the ruler of the sky and now in exile, forgotten by time. You stand at the edge of this new world, a place that was forged in Enlil's fury, where the breath of the storm still lingers in the air, whispering its secrets into the quiet. In the absence of Enlil's storm, there is no longer a clear line between the divine and the mortal. The sky has no voice but its own. The winds speak only in rustling echoes. The gods that once ruled the heavens now seem distant, irrelevant. The world has changed, the old order has crumbled, and yet the question remains: what happens when the god who once defined the storm is no longer present? What is left of a world shaped by his breath, Enlil's exile, is now complete. His name is a whisper carried on the wind, a memory that no one dares to speak aloud. But the storm is still here. It remains in the air, in the quiet hum of the breeze. In the way the winds shift as though they remember what once was, his breath is not gone. It has simply become a part of the world itself, woven into the very fabric of nature. The world continues to turn, but the presence of Enlil has left a scar on its soul. The sky, once filled with his storm, is now empty, yet it seems to carry something beneath its surface. Something waiting, still restless. The winds are no longer ruled by a god, but they still know him. They still carry his memory, and in the most fleeting moments, you can almost hear him in the rustling breeze. There are no grand rituals left, no priests left to worship him. The storm has faded, but it has not disappeared. The forces that shaped the heavens and the earth still linger in the world. They are no longer as they once were, but they remain. And perhaps deep within the storm, there is something waiting for its time to return. Perhaps the exile of Enlil was never truly complete. You stand on the edge of this new world where the winds still whisper his name, where the storm still lingers in the quiet corners of the earth. You cannot help but wonder, was it truly an exile, or was it something else? Enlil's power was never fully bound. His breath, his storm, still stirs beneath the surface. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the storm, beyond the winds that carry his breath, there is a place where he waits. For the gods, even in exile, never truly disappear. They linger in the spaces between the winds, in the silence that follows the storm, in the storms that still rage. And as you leave the remnants of the storm behind, you feel the faintest shift in the air. It is subtle, barely perceptible, but it is there. The winds stir, and in the deepest corners of your mind, you hear it a whisper, faint but unmistakable. The storm is not gone, it is merely waiting. And if you listen closely enough, you will hear it. There are more gods. There are always more gods. The next storm is out there waiting, ancient and ever-shifting, waiting for those who truly listen. Perhaps even now, Enlil stirs in the heart of the storm, preparing to return this time in ways beyond comprehension, beyond divine reign. But only for those who dare to listen. It seems that we have come to the end of Enlil's tale, but the winds still whisper, faint but persistent. The storm has passed, yet its presence lingers in the air, in the memory of a world once shaped by a god of unimaginable power. The echoes of Enlil's breath, though silent for now, will always return in the winds, in the pulse of nature. In the untold stories that still stir in the shadows, there are always more gods. They walk, not as rulers, but as forces of nature, forgotten, yet always present in the air, in the storms. In the quiet spaces between the world's heartbeat, Enlil was not an end, but a turning point. his exile marking the collapse of one era and the birth of another. And even though his name is now carried only by the wind, the next storm is waiting. For the gods are eternal, hidden behind the veil of time, speaking only to those who are willing to listen. You are left standing on the precipice of this world. You have glimpsed the storm, felt the fury of Enlil's breath, and heard the whispers of the past. But there is more to hear, more to understand. The winds that once carried the storm god's rage now carry the promise of new gods. New storms, and stories still yet to be written. The storm will always return. It is in the air, it is in the world, and most of all, it is in youth, one who dares to listen. And so, the journey does not end here. It never truly ends. If your candle hasn't gone out, then you're probably ready for the next god.